Welcome. As we shared before, The Big Time is an acclaimed novel by Fritz Lieber, a legendary sci-fi writer. It won the Hugo Award in 1958 for Best Novel or Novelette and was originally published in two parts in the March and April 1958 issues of Galaxy, the heralded sci-fi magazine that was spearheaded and edited by EJ's father, Horace L. Gold. So to recap our previous episodes, the Big Time is the private name that Greta, our narrator, and others use to refer to something called the Change War. You don't know about the Change War, but it is affecting your life all the time. And you have probably experienced hints of it in all sorts of eerie Twilight Zone type events you may have experienced here and there throughout your life. The Change War is a war of time travelers who can go through the hearts of stars and the spaces between galaxies and different places and times, whether the past or the future, for the purpose of changing them and winning the final victory a billion or more years forward into the future from when the events of our story take place. Greta currently resides in what is simply called the Place, which is outside of the cosmos and is where soldiers who have been fighting in the Change War and badly roughed up after raids into these many times and places are entertained and nursed back to health and kidded and joked back to sanity. Greta's formal title is entertainer, and it is her job to do this nursing and kidding. There are two sides in the Change War, the snakes and the spiders. Greta's side is the spiders. The beings on both sides are double gangers, which means they can operate either within or outside of the cosmos, as well as some of them also being demons, which means they act reasonably alive while doing so, which the ghosts can't. Besides Greta, our characters so far include Sid, the boss, Beauregard, Sid's co-pilot and also piano player, Doc, a drunk who has seen the horrors of life in Nazi-occupied Tsarist Russia, Maud, the old girl, Lily, the new girl, Eric, the pride of the von Hohenwalds, Bruce, the new boy, and Mark, the Roman soldier. In this new episode, we will be introduced to two new characters, both ETs, one a Lunan named Illy, and the other a Satyr named Sevensee. So take your own place in the Big Time and join us now as we find our characters talking and arguing among themselves, exploring the gallery, which contains memorabilia from the various battles and time periods they have been in, and the goings-on of a party they are having before there is an alarming SOS and a call to action, leading to more urgent discussions and a kind of general mayhem. Thanks for joining us and enjoy the show. Hell is the place for me, for to hell go the fine churchmen and the fine knights, killed in the tourney or in some grand war, the brave soldiers and the gallant gentlemen. With them will I go. There go also the fair, gracious ladies who have lovers, 2 or 3, beside their lord. There go the gold and the silver, the sables and ermine. There go the harpers and the minstrels and the kings of the earth. 9 for a party.
I exchanged my drink for a new one from another tray Bo was bringing around. The gray of the void was beginning to look real pleasant, like warm, thick mist with millions of tiny diamonds floating in it. Doc was sitting grandly at the bar with a steaming tumbler of tea. A chaser, I guess, since he was just putting down a shot glass. Sid was talking to Eric and laughing at the same time, and I said to myself, it begins to feel like a party, but something's lacking. It wasn't anything to do with the major maintainer. Its telltale was glowing a steady red like a nice little home fire amid the tight cluster of dials that included all the controls except the lonely and frightening introversion switch that was never touched. Then Maud's couch curtains winked out, and there were she and the Roman sitting quietly side by side. He looked down at his shiny boots and the rest of his black duds like he was just waking up and couldn't believe it all, and he said,
Omnia mutantur, nos et mutamur in illis.
And I raised my eyebrows at Bo, who was taking the tray back, and he did proud by old Vicksburg by translating.
All things change, and we change with them.
Then Mark slowly looked around at us, and I can testify that a Roman smile is just as warm as any other nationality. And he finally said,
We are 9, the proper number for a party. The couches, too. It is good.
Maud chuckled proudly, and Eric shouted.
Welcome back from the void, comrade.
And then, because he's German and thinks all parties have to be noisy and satirically pompous, he jumped on a couch and announced,
Herren und Damen, permit me to introduce the noblest Roman of them all, Marcus Vespasius Niger, legate to Nero Claudius, called Germanicus in a former time stream, and who in 763 IUC, correct Mark? It means 10 AD, you meatheads, died bravely fighting the Parthians and the snakes in the Battle of Alexandria. Hoch, hoch, hoch!
We all swung our glasses and cheered with him, and Sid yelled at Eric,
Keep your feet off the furniture, you unschooled rogue.
He grinned and boomed at all 3 hussars.
Take your ease, recuperees.
And Maud and Mark got their drinks, the Roman painting Bo by refusing Philemian wine in favor of scotch and soda, and right away everyone was talking a mile a minute. We had a lot to catch up on. There was the usual yak about the war. The snakes are laying minefields in the void. I don't believe it. How can you mine nothing? And the shortages, bourbon, bobby pins, and the stabilitin that would have brought Mark out of it faster. And what had become of people? Marcia, oh, she's not around anymore. She'd been caught in a change gale and green and stinking in 5 seconds, but I wasn't going to say that. And Mark had to be told about Bruce's glove, which convulsed us all over again, and the Roman remembering a legionary who had carried a grape all the way to Octavius because he'd accidentally been issued the unbelievable luxury item sugar instead of the usual salt. And Eric asked Sid if he had any new ghost girls in stock, and Sid sucked his beard like the old goat he is.
Dost thou ask me, lusty Alamund? Nay, there are several great beauties, among them an Austrian countess from Strauss's Vienna. And if it were not for Swinting here,
I poked a finger in Eric's chest between 2 of the bright buttons with their tiny death's head. You, my little Hohenwald, are a menace to us real girls. You have too much of a thing about the unawakened ghost kind. He called me his little demon and hugged me a bit too hard to prove it wasn't so, and then he suggested we show Bruce the art gallery. I thought this was a real brilliant idea, but when I tried to argue him out of it, he got stubborn. Bruce and Lily were willing to do anything anyone wanted to them, though not so willing to pay any attention while doing it. The saber cut was just a thin red line on his cheek. She'd washed away all the dried blood. The gallery gets you, though. It's a bunch of paintings and sculptures and especially odd knickknacks, all made by soldiers recuperating here, and a lot of them telling about the Change War from the stuff they're made of: brass cartridges, flaked flint, bits of ancient pottery glued into futuristic shapes, mashed up ink and gold rebeaten by a Martian, whirls of beady lumen wire, a picture in tempera on a crinkle-crackled thick round of quartz that had filled a starship porthole, a Sumerian inscription chiseled into the brick from an atomic oven. There are a lot of things in the gallery, and I can always find some I haven't seen before. It gets you, as I say, thinking about the guys that made them and their thoughts and the far times and places they came from. And sometimes, when I'm feeling low, I'll come and look at them so I'll feel still lower and get inspired to kick myself back into good temper. It's the only history of the place there is, and it doesn't change a great deal because the things in it and the feelings that went into them resist the change winds better than anything else. Right now, Eric's witty lecture was bouncing off the big ears I hide under my page boy Bob, and I was thinking how awful it is for us that there's not only change, but change. You don't know from one minute to the next whether a mood or idea you've got is really new or just welling up into you because the past has been altered by the spiders or snakes. Change winds can blow not only death, but anything short of it, down to the featheriest fancy. They blow thousands of times faster than time moves, but no one can say how much faster or how far one of them will travel, or what damage it'll do, or how soon it'll damp out. The big time isn't the little time. And then, for the demons, there's the fear that our personality will just fade and someone else climb into the driver's seat and us not even know. Of course, we demons are supposed to be able to remember through change and in spite of it. That's why we are demons and not ghosts like the other doppelgangers, or merely zombies or unborn and nothing more. And as Mo truly said, there aren't any great men among us, and blamed few of the masses either. We're a rare sort of people, and that's why the spiders have to recruit us where they find us without caring about our previous knowledge and background. A foreign legion of time, a strange kind of folk, bright but always in the background, with built-in nostalgia and cynicism, as adaptable as a Centaurian shape changer, but with memories as long as a Lunan's 6 arms, the kind of change people, you might say, the cream of the damned. But sometimes I wonder if our memories are as good as we think they are, and if the whole past wasn't once entirely different from anything we remember, and we've forgotten that we forgot. As I say, the gallery gets you feeling real low, and so now I said to myself, back to your lousy little commandant, kid, and gave myself a stiff boot. Eric was holding up a green bowl with gold dolphins, or spaceships on it, and saying,
And to my mind, this proves that Etruscan art is derived from Egyptian. Don't you agree, Bruce?
Bruce looked up, all smiles from Lily.
What was that, dear chap?
Eric's forehead got dark as the door, and I was glad the hussars had parked their sabers along with their shakos. But before he could even get out a Jerry cuss word, Doc breezed up in that plateau state of drunkenness, so like hypnotized sobriety, moving as if he were on a dolly, ghosted the bowl out of Garrick's hand.
A beautiful specimen of middle systemic Venusian. When Ike H. finished it, He told me you couldn't look at it and not feel the waves of the northern Venusian shallows rippling around your hoofs. But it might look better inverted, I wonder. Who are you, young officer? Eat Savo.
He carefully put the bowl back on its shelf and rolled on. It's a fact that Doc knows the art gallery better than any of us, really by heart, he being the oldest inhabitant, though he maybe picked a bad time to show off his knowledge. Eric was going to take out after him, but I said, "Nix, comrade. Remember gloves and sugar?" And he contented himself with complaining.
That Nichevo. It's so gloomy and hopeless. Ungeheuerlich, I tell you. Liebchen, they should have Russians never working for the spiders, not even as entertainers.
I grinned at him and squeezed his hand. Not much entertainment in Doc these days, is there? He grinned back at me a shade sheepishly, and his face smoothed, and his blue eyes looked sweet again for a second.
I shouldn't want to claw out at people, Zatlagreta, but at times I am just a jealous old man.
Which is not entirely true, as he isn't a day over 33, although his hair is nearly white. Our lovers had drifted on a few steps until they were almost fading into the surgery green. It was the last spot I would have picked for a formal preliminaries to a little British smooching, but Lily probably doesn't share my prejudices, although I remembered she told me she served a brief hitch in the Arachnoid Field Hospital before being transferred to the place. But she couldn't have had anything like the experience I'd had during my short and sour career as a spider nurse, when I'd acquired my best hated nightmare and flopped completely, job-wise, but on the floor too, at seeing a doctor flick a switch and a being, badly injured but human, turn into a long cluster of glistening strange fruit. Ugh, it always made me want to toss my cookies and my buttons. And to think that dear old Daddy Anton wanted his Greta child to be a doctor. Well, I could see this wasn't getting me anywhere I wanted to go, and after all, there was a party going on. Doc was babbling something at a great rate to Sid. I just hoped Doc wouldn't get inspired to go into his animal imitations, which sound pretty fierce and once seriously offended some recuperating ETs. Maud was demonstrating to Mark a 23rd century two-step, and Bo sat at the piano, improvising softly on her rhythm. As the deep thrumming, relaxing notes hit us, Eric's face brightened, and he dragged me over. Pleasantly soon I had my feet off the diamond rough floor, which we don't carpet because most of the ETs, the dear boys, like it hard, and I was shouldering back deep into the couch, nearest the piano, with cushions all around me and a fresh drink in my hand, while my Nazi boyfriend was getting ready to discharge his Weltschmerz as song, which didn't alarm me too much, as his baritone is passable. Things felt real good, like the maintainer was just idling to keep the place in existence and moored to the cosmos, not exerting itself at all, or at most taking an occasional lazy paddle stroke. At times, the place's loneliness can be happy and comfortable. Then Bo raised an eyebrow at Eric, who nodded, and the next thing they were launched into a song we all know, though I've never found out where it originally came from. This time it made me think of Lily, and I wondered why, and why it's the tradition at recuperation stations to call the new girl Lily, though in this case it happened to be her real name.
Standing in the doorway, just outside of space, winds of change blow round you, but don't touch your face. You smile as you whisper tenderly, please cross to me, recuperate. The operation's over. Come in and close the door. This is chapter 4 of The Big Time. Vi Beohash Fresca Mrs. Camel whirled behind the circuit of the shuddering bear in fractured atoms. SOS from nowhere.
I realized the piano had deserted Eric, and I cranked my head up and saw Bo, Maud, and Sid streaking for the control divan. The major maintainer was blinking emergency green and fast, but the code was plain enough for me to even recognize the spider distress call, and for a second I felt just sick. Then Eric blew out his reserve breath in the middle of door, and I gave myself another of those helpful mental boots at the base of the spine, and we hurried after them toward the center of the place, along with Mark. The blinks faded as we got there, and Sid told us not to move because we were making shadows. He glued an eye to the telltale, and we held still as statues as he caressed the dials like he was making love. One sensitive hand flicked out past the introversion switch, over to the minor maintainer, and right away the place was dark as your soul, and there was nothing for me but Eric's arm and the knowledge that Sid was nursing a green light I couldn't even see, although my eyes had plenty of time to accommodate. Then the green light finally came back very slowly, and I could see the dear, reliable old face, the green gold beer making him look like a merman. And then the telltale flared bright, and Sid flicked on the place lights, and I leaned back.
That nails them, lads. Whoever and whenever they may be, get ready for a pickup.
Bo, who was closest, of course, looked at him sharply. Sid shrugged uneasily.
Meseemed at first it was from our own globe, 1,000 years before our Lord, but that indication flickered and faded like witchfire. As it is, the call comes from something smaller than the place, and surges adrift from the cosmos. Meseemed too at one point I knew the fist of the caller, an Antipodean autonomist named Benson Carter, but that likewise changed.
We're not in the right phase of the Cosmos Place's rhythm for a pickup, are we, sir?
Ordinarily not, boy.
I didn't think we had any pickups scheduled or standby orders.
We haven't.
Mark's eyes glowed. He tapped Eric on the shoulder.
An Octavian denarius against 10 Reichsmarks. It is a snake trap.
Eric's grin showed his teeth.
Make it first through the door, next operation, and I'm on.
It didn't take that to tell me things were serious, or the thought that there's always a first time for bumping into something from really outside the cosmos. The snakes had broken our code more than once. Maud was quietly serving out weapons, and Doc was helping her. Only Bruce and Lily stood off, but they were watching. The telltale brightened. Sid reached toward the maintainer.
All right, my hearties, remember, through this doorway, past the fishiest flanglers in and out of the cosmos.
The door appeared to the left and above where it should be, and darkened much too fast. There was a gust of stale salt sea wind, if that makes sense, but no stepped up change winds I could tell, and I had been bracing myself against them. The door got inky, and there was a flicker of gray fur whips and a flash of copper flesh and gilt and something dark and a clump of hoofs, and Eric was sighting a stun gun across his left forearm. And then the door had vanished like that, and a tentacled silvery Lunan and a Venusian satyr were coming straight toward us. The Lunan was hugging a pile of clothes and weapons. The satyr was helping a wasp-waisted woman carry a heavy-looking bronze chest. The woman was wearing a short skirt and high-collared bolero jacket of leather so dark and brown it was almost black. She had a two-horned Petsofa hairdress, and she was boldly gilded here and there, and wore sandals and copper anklets and wristlets, one of them a copper-plated collar, and from her wide copper belt hung a short-handled, double-headed axe. She was dark complexioned, and her forehead and chin receded, but the effect was anything but weak. She had a face like a beautiful arrowhead, and a familiar one, by golly, but before I could say,
Cabby, see a labreeze. It's Cabby with two friends. Break out a couple of ghost girls.
and then I saw it really was Old Home Week, because I recognized my Lunan boyfriend, Illy. And in the midst of all the confusion, I got a nice kick out of knowing I was getting so I could tell the personality of one silver-furred muzzle from another. They reached the control divan and Illy dumped his load, and the others let down the chest. And Cabby staggered, but shook off the two ETs when they started to support her. And she looked daggers at Sid when he tried to do the same, although she's his sweet Keftian friend he'd mentioned to Bruce. She leaned straight-armed on the divan and took two gasping breaths, so deep that the ridges of her spine showed through her brown-skinned waist. And then she threw up her head and commanded,
Wine!
while Bo was rushing it. Sid tried to take her hand again.
Sweetling, I never heard you call before and knew not this pretty little fist.
But she ripped out,
Save your comfort for the Lunan.
and I looked, and I saw, hey Zeus, that one of Ilhillis's 6 tentacles was lopped off halfway. That was for me, and going to him, I fast briefed myself. Remember, he only weighs 50 pounds for all he's 7 feet high, and he doesn't like low sounds or to be grabbed. The 2 legs aren't tentacles and don't act the same. He uses them for long walks. Tentacles for leaps, uses tentacles for close vision too, and for manipulation, of course. Extended, they mean he's at ease. Retracted, on guard or nervous. Sharply retracted, disgusted, greeting. Just then one of them swept across my face like a sweet-smelling feather duster, and I said, Illy man, it's been a lot of sleeps, and brushed my fingers across his muzzle. It still took a little self-control not to hug him, and I did reach a little cluckingly for his lopped tentacle, but he wafted it away from me, and the little voice box belted to his side squeaked.
Naughty, naughty. Papa will fix his little old self. Greta girl, ever managed even a terra octopus?
I had, an intelligent one from around 250,000 AD, but I didn't tell him so. I stood and let him talk to the palm of my hand with one of his tentacles. I don't savvy feather talk, but it feels good, though I've often wondered who taught him English, and watched him use a couple others to whisk a sort of Lunan band-aid out of his pouch and cap his wound with it. Meanwhile, the satyr knelt over the bronze chest, which was decorated with little death's heads and crosses with hoops at the top and swastikas, looking much older than Nazi. And the satyr said to Sid,
Quick thinking, Gov. When you saw the door coming in high and softened up gravity under it. But could I have some help now?
Sid touched the minor maintainer, and we all got very light, and my stomach did a flip-flop while the satyr piled on the chest of clothes and weapons that Illy had been carrying, and pranced off with it all, and carefully put it down at the end of the bar. I decided the satyr's English instructor must have been quite a character, too. Wish I'd met him. Her. It. Sid thought to ask Illy if he wanted moon normal gravity in one sector, but my boy likes to mix, and being such a lightweight, Earth normal gravity doesn't bother him. As he said to me once,
Would Jovian gravity bother a beetle, Greta girl?
I asked Illy about the satyr, and he squeaked that his name was Sevensee, and that he'd never met him before this operation. I knew the satyrs were from 1 billion years in the future, just as the loonies were from 1 billion in the past. And I thought, Christus, it must have been a real big emergency-like operation to have the spiders using those two for it, with 2 billion years between them, a time difference. It gives you a feeling of awe for a second, you know. I started to ask Illy about it, but just then Bo came scampering back from the bar with a big red and black earthenware goblet of wine. We try to keep a variety of drinking tools in stock, so folks will feel more at home. Cabby grabbed it from him and drained most of it in one swallow, and then smashed it on the floor. She does things like that, though Sid's tried to teach her better. Then she stared at what she was thinking about until the whites showed all around her eyes and her lips pulled way back from her teeth, and she looked a lot less human than the two ETs, just like a fury. Only a time traveler knows how like the wild murals and engravings of some of them the ancients can look. My hair stood up at the screech she let out. She smashed a fist into the divan and cried,
Goddess, must I see Crete destroyed, revived, and now destroyed again? It is too much for your servant.
Personally, I thought she could stand anything. There was a rush of questions at what she said about Crete. I asked one of them, for the news certainly frightened me, but she shot up her arm straight for silence and took a deep breath and began.
In the balance hung the battle, rowing like black centipedes. The Dorian hulls bore down on our outnumbered ships. On the bright beach, masked by rock, Sevensee and I stood by the needle gun, ready to give the black hulls silent wounds. Beside us was Illy, suited as a sea monster. But then,
Then I saw she wasn't altogether the Iron Babe, for her voice broke, and she started to shake and to sob rackingly, although her face was still a mask of rage, and she threw up the wine. Sid stepped in and made her stop, which I think he'd been wanting to do all along.
This concludes episode 3 of The Big Time by Fritz Leiber. Please join us and stay tuned for further episodes.